In my life, I've only asked myself 3 different questions: who, what, and how. Who put me on this earth? Why did they put me on this earth? And how much size matters? Because that is a question that literally I always ask myself all the time. It's a question that I ask myself here on this bed.
Exactly how much size matters. Most of what you read and see online on this subject is anecdotal and basically meaningless, but there is some real research on this subject. I'm quite deep in the literature on this. I won't say.
I will say, anybody that looks like that, guaranteed to know exactly what they talk about. I mean, straight teeth, perfect hair, probably some sea salt spray. I mean, I wish I could. I'm black, so.
How deep. And in my opinion, the best study on this subject comes from Proust and colleagues, who had women actually handle 3D physical models and pick their favorite. And the reason this method is so good is because it gets around standard mismeasurement and misreporting issues, right?
I'm sorry, but if you're walking around with if you're simply walking around with 8 inches in girth, I want you to register that fucking missile. Holy shit.
A woman might say in a pen and paper survey or in a conversation that she prefers 8 inches or 3 inches, but the problem with just asking is that you don't know that she knows how big or small that actually is.
My girlfriend tells me all the time that it's perfect the way it is. So that's all I need.
And in this study, women selected, on average, obviously there was a lot of variance, but on average, they selected 6.3 inches for a long-term relationship and 6.4 inches for a short-term relationship.
Is there a difference between 6.3 and 6.4? I mean, I don't think I've ever actually seen a difference in 0.1 inches in my life. 0.1 inches is almost as meaningless as asking the question of, where's your dad? I mean, like, it's completely useless. But hey, we all have different strokes for different folks, as he's explaining here.
16.2 centimeters for those who think in that system. Now, you might be thinking, well, Mackin, that sounds kind of average, but men are very generous when estimating themselves.
And there's nothing wrong with average, so get fucked.
Are somewhat generous when estimating men as well. One study found, for example, that men tend to overestimate their size by about 21%. So, rule of thumb, whatever he says he is, you can subtract an inch from that.
4 inches. 4 fuckers. So, yeah, take that.
The real average in a meta-analysis of 17 studies was 5.16 inches, about 13.1 centimeters. And while it's feasible that that number could be off, it's not going to be off by a lot. And if you look at the distribution here, 6.3 inches would be about 95th percentile. If you're walking down the sidewalk, it's about as common as seeing a guy who's 6'2". It's not unheard of, but it's not particularly common.
Unless you come where I'm from. I mean, like, I feels like every other motherfucker around here is 6'2". I'm standing at 6 foot flat, and I feel like a fucking midget. Not to mention that I'm Nigerian, and in Nigeria, well, you know what they say about Nigerians, let alone Africans. I mean, I'm fucking Nigerian. I did my AncestryDNA.com. Holy fuck. I gotta thank my girlfriend for that one. And my dad.
Most women will only be with between a few and several men in their entire lives. This means that most women actually won't encounter a cylinder that big. And this is backed by the same study. They also had women select the biggest that they'd seen in the wild and the smallest that they'd seen in the wild to get an idea. And you can see that most women hadn't seen that big, which is quite interesting because, again, you hear 6.3, 6.4, and you think, oh, that preference, you know, it sounds really modest, really reasonable. But then you realize that in this sample, women were selecting a preference for a size that was bigger than they had ever encountered. It's pretty interesting. And again, a lot of you are going to be surprised by this. If you haven't measured from the top side with a ruler, you really have no idea. And for circumference, it's a similar story, right? Women preferred 4.8 inches for long term.
We in a 4-year relationship. Got him.
And again, might not sound big, but bigger than the average man, which is about 4.59 inches or 11.66 centimeters in circumference. Men are much smaller than what the average woman prefers in this domain. So that's number one. Number two, the natural question is, how much do women care? You can do, again, pen and paper survey and just say, how much do you care? But that really doesn't give you much behavioral insight. I think that this Proust study asked a really good question, which is, how many of you have actually ended a relationship partially over a man's size? Because that's when we get, you know, a behavioral deal breaker, so to say. About 27% of women reported ending a relationship partially because of a man's size. And in the vast majority of cases, it was because they were too small, not too.
My ex said it was because she was going to college. I think there were other reasons. She said it was college. maybe it was my penis. That's all I'm saying.
Big. Now, in terms of how to think about this, I would say that the analogy to height that we've been using for the distributions applies here as well. Is it true that in the abstract, all else being equal, most women would prefer that you're 95th percentile for height, right? 6'2", or 95th percentile for this, 6.3, 6.4? Yes. In both of those domains, most women will prefer taller or longer than they've ever had a relationship with. However, the fact that they've had relationships with men who are not that says that it's not the only thing in the world. Sometimes some men will be short enough that it's a deal breaker for many women.
It is a very common question. I mean, if your preference in a man is height, your preference is height. If your preference is penis size, your preference is penis size. But why is it so bad whenever a man suggests that their preference, fill in the blanks? I can't say that. I'm in a relationship. So what the fuck is the double standard here? Not only that, have you guys ever seen 6.3 inches? Like ever? Like 6.3 inches is actually very big. And I don't think I have... What? Hold on. I'm going to go grab one. Hold up. Okay. I'm tired. I just did 10 miles today. 6.3 inches. Would you believe me if I told you that that is 6.3 inches? I'd be a liar. That's 11 inches. That's not 6.3. 6.3. Fuck. Is that? It's the size of my fucking head, damn near. 6.3 is actually fucking gigantic. And most of the time I always be tripping about, am I, typical dude shit. I'm not going to fucking get into it. But typical dude shit. Like, is 8 inches enough? Is 9 inches? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, bruh, 7 inches is fucking gigantic. That's a very big common denominator. But yeah, that's pretty much all I want to talk about today. I just saw this video and I thought I'd share it with you guys. So